Aloha, Rolita Flores Ezeonu, Vice President of Instruction at Green River College. I think one of the things that Mark mentioned was how I came to the United States. And it's quite a long story, but I'm gonna take it back to my parents. My dad was one of the first Sakatas that came to Oahu and Maui. He was about 15 and he left poverty in the Philippines. His family on my dad's side, they farmed salt. And so it was a very poor, he lived in a poor neighborhood and just poor family. And so what he did was he actually lied to come to Hawaii and pretended that he was older than he was to be one of the first plantation workers for sugarcane and pineapple. And then to make a long story short, he was married already, was divorced. And when he was 56, he wanted to get married again. And at that time, my mom was in the Philippines. She was 24, and she was the oldest of 8 girls. One of the things that, for me as a woman and listening to my mom, she was the oldest of 8 girls. My grandparents wanted her to be out of poverty and they wanted the whole family to get out of poverty. So they did this whole thing where they kind of did a catfish thing where my grandfather's brother pen palled with my dad and pretended to be my mom. And so after 3 months, my dad went to the Philippines. My mom was 24, my dad was 56. She married him to be able to come to the United States. They got married and I was conceived. And my mom, her first job in Hawaii was working at a chicken factory where she was plucking chicken feathers. And we're super disconnected to that. Growing up here, I go to the store and I see the chicken, but my mom was in the assembly line doing that as a young woman and pregnant with me. And then she retired as a housekeeper and she worked at Waikiki Beachcomber Hotel in Waikiki. And so she did that for 30 years. And my dad had passed away already when I was 20. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Hawaii, grew up in a place called Kalihi Valley. And Kalihi Valley in Honolulu is, I would say, similar to kind of South Seattle, where you have a lot of immigrants. You have on my street where I grew up, there were Filipinos, we had Portuguese, we had Japanese, we had Chinese folks up and down the street. But I didn't know myself that I was not well off. My parents were working class. And so I grew up knowing that my parents sacrificed a lot for me. When we would go to Waikiki, instead of going where the tourists were, we would go to the back elevators where my brown aunties and uncles would go up to, because my mom was a housekeeper. So that's what I knew of the hotel industry, was just the back part, the labor of the brown bodies that were taking care of tourists that were coming to Hawaii. I have 2 sisters. The interesting thing about my name is, and I think you probably see this in a lot of Filipino culture. So my name is Rolita. My dad's name was Roman, and my mom's name was Angelita, Rolita. And then, I don't know, maybe they ran out of creativity, but I have 2 sisters, younger sisters, and Carol and Catherine. My sister Carol is still on Oahu. She's actually a principal at Sacred Hearts Academy, the school. I'm alumni of that school. She's principal there now. And then my younger sister, Catherine, works for a dental company where she tries to recruit a variety of folks to go into the dentistry. So I am married to an awesome guy. His name is Okay, and he and I actually met in Seattle. So I lived on Queen Anne, and so my roommate was dating his friend, and so he came over for a barbecue, and I'll just say the rest is history. It's a multicultural, interracial family. My husband's from Nigeria, I'm from Hawaii, ancestry Filipino. So our kids, Chinwe, she's 23, and she's a graduate student at University of San Francisco, and she's studying to be a marriage and family therapist. Although she has been counseling us, pretending to counsel us. I said, time out, girl. We're not doing that. And then we have a son, Chike. He's 19 and he's at University of Massachusetts, all the way across the United States in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. The dynamics there have been wide and deep. I think in growing our kids here in South Seattle, they grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. And I think for my two kids, especially for my daughter, she played recreational basketball with kids in the neighborhood who were Black and brown. But when she went to Seattle Prep, she started to question, the dynamics between what was going on in a predominantly white institution. And she had a lot of questions for me and my husband with regard to herself as a Black-brown young person, and her hair and how she wore it with just many blondes or white people. And she went through a struggle for her self-identity and thinking about who she was and how she could be herself in a white institution. I think basketball was her way of being able to find strength, although even outside of the basketball court, she was an advocate for girls of color. Chike, on the other hand, there's a dynamics between boys and girls, and when he was at Seattle Prep as well, the dynamics were slightly different because I think our culture kind of reveres athletes, and here he was being in this white institution, yet the same experiences that my daughter was having, he had, but it was somewhat opposite because he was an athlete, he was male. So as far as growing Filipino Black children, I think for me what was really important was that for them to understand where they came from and to know their roots. So as they were growing up, I always talked to Chinwe and Chike about their roots. We would take them home to Hawaii and they would be surrounded by the Filipino side of the family, or when my mom then would come up, they would understand and know that side of the family. When they started to experience some of this microaggressions, I would say microaggressions and just some prejudices against their skin color or the way their hair was, there was a lot of anger actually. So when you're working with in education, for me as an educator, I just got super angry. Yet I don't think that was helpful in some ways, because we had to help and our daughter and her son be able to talk through this and also see the bigger context of what was going on, along with the fact that they themselves could advocate for themselves. We started to hook them up with mentors. When I went to the school and as a person of color, a Filipina, I mentioned their experiences to the school. And then I ended up on the board of Seattle Prep. And I think one of the things for me was to really just be at the forefront to amplify the voices of students of color, for Filipinos at that school, and also their Black and brown brothers and sisters. Yeah, I thought about that question a lot. I was thinking, should I write a poem about it? What comes to me when I think about being Filipino? I think for me, it's what I think of is I feel joy. I think of laughter. I think of the memories of my ancestors and the stories that I hear of my great-grandfather who also came from the Philippines on a boat, on a ship, to also come to the Hawaiian Islands. It's in my blood. I think of generosity. I think of hardship. I think of perseverance and being able to go through hard times. I think of my dad and the struggles that he went through. And then when I'm in my job, I think about how far they brought me for me to be where I am as a Filipina, to be able to have a position of power and make influence policy and procedure. I want to say a quick story. When I first moved into my role as a dean at Highland College, one of the first things that I got a call from was from 3 Filipino administrators in the Washington state system, in the community and technical colleges. They invited me to lunch, and they sat with me and they talked with me and talked to me about the enormity of having that job. I felt a little scared because they were saying, Rolita, we've gone through the system, we've been doing this job, now it's your turn to be able to do this. We're passing the baton on to you. And I just felt a great weight on my shoulders. I also felt great pride when I became a dean. And when I became a dean, I thought about them and all the hard work that they had to go through. And for me to feel so honored that I was in a position of power to be able to do that. And from there, other faculty and staff would come to me and share with me their pain and their struggles of being in a very white institution. And we were able to kind of find like community with one another so we could help each other through those experiences. Yeah, actually growing up in Hawaii, and I think this is still this stage true right now. Growing up in Hawaii, there are just many Asian groups and Pacific Islanders, etc. But if you look at the Asians kind of, I wouldn't say ranking, but hierarchy, the Filipinos were on the bottom. And so there was a lot of that stereotype and prejudice as I was growing up, even in a very diverse area like where I grew up in Hawaii. And there was I just had to fight to prove myself. I wasn't the smartest in elementary school or high school, but when I left Hawaii to go to school in Pullman, it was such a shock for me to go from my family and my community and then going to someplace like Eastern Washington where you couldn't see someone who looked like you. It was a shock. I was so sad. I was so frustrated. I had experienced a lot of microaggressions. And one of the things that I went to were the works of Dr. Martin Luther King. I would watch his videos, at that time it was like those film things, those film reels, go to the library and go borrow those and then and listen to his voice. And the other one that I went to was Dr. Jose Rizal. And I was really thinking about his sacrifices and all the things that he had to do to fight for the Filipino people against the Spaniards. So that really strengthened me when I was at WSU. When I was there, we formed the first FASA group at WSU. We were like the founding members, the OGs at that time. Actually, my my master's thesis chair was Filipino, Dr. Alexis Tan. He did a lot of work with television, and so my master's was in television role models, and he really helped shape me as an educator. I didn't see many Filipinos in education, and he was like my mentor. So from there, he encouraged me to get a doctorate at WSU, but it was such a long process to be in school. So I got my doctorate a little later, But he was one of the instrumental folks at Washington State University. So how does that translate to how I grew my kids? I think from the beginning, from when they were in utero, me and my husband really thought about their names and how powerful names could be. So we chose a Nigerian, Hawaiian, and kept their last names. So I know that for some folks, even if it sounds complicated, we told our kids, you advocate and you tell people how to say your name. So we talked to them a lot. We bought books, brought them to many different types of cultural events, and just we chose specifically and intentionally to live in South Seattle so that they could see themselves in the community. So that's what we did. Born and raised in Hawaii, spoke English, but my great-grandmother grew me as well, so she lived with us, and she spoke to me in Ilocano. And I understood it, knew it, breathed it, and similar to folks my age, when I went to school, we were forced or told not to speak a different language. And so I lost that. You know, it's sad because when you speak in the mother tongue, there's a richness and a value to the words. It's not really easily translated in English. So when I go home and I'm with my family, I can totally understand all the things that folks are talking about. But then I feel like I don't have a voice when I can speak in the language. And I know that is so important. When I came here, I know that Tagalog was a big language here. I didn't hear too much Ilocano, and so I remember going to one of those Asian stores, and then one of the aunties speaking to me in Tagalog, and I was like, oh, I don't understand. And they're like, what kind of Filipino are you? Jokingly, but I felt sad that that was even stated, that I couldn't speak the language. So yeah, I feel sorrow for that. Yeah, so so in Nigeria there's 3 major languages on top of, there's English, but his tribe is Igbo, and so we know like just the basics, but didn't raise the kids speaking in Igbo. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, the funniest thing, like whenever we would go home to Hawaii and my mom would speak to me in Ilocano, and then my daughter's like, huh, what's happening? So so it's kind of like I'm the translator for both worlds. But I think, you know, they've had an interest in just really getting to know my mom. I mean, they're Inai, and being able to communicate with her. So my mom's speaking to them in English, some in Ilocano. So I think they understand a few words. My dad was already passed away, and so when I started dating, this is interesting how colorism affects Filipinos. So when I mentioned to my mom that I was dating someone who was from Nigeria, the first thing that she told me was, is he black? And that struck me because it brought memories of when I was growing up and we would watch like the Miss Universe pageant, and you would see how light-skinned some of the Filipinas were. And my grandmother telling me, Rolita, don't go out in the sun too much because you're gonna get really dark. Like you should put on a cap, put long sleeves on because you don't want to get super dark. And so it reminded me a lot of the colonization of the Spaniards with the Filipinos, and how it shifted how we look at skin tone. That was the first thing that my mom said. It wasn't anything else. It was about the skin tone. And so when OK and I went to Hawaii, it was fine. But what struck me really was just the initial thing around the skin tone. Three Filipinos that I would love to meet would be 1, Dr. Jose Rizal, 2, Pia Wurtzbach, who used to be Miss Universe, and 3, Christetta Comerford. I knew her because my sister told me that there was an executive chef for the White House who was Filipina. So it was really cool to know that the White House has someone who's a Filipina who's cooking the food and setting the menus for the presidents, first ladies, dignitaries of the United States. I think for me, in trying to understand him and how much courage he had. First of all, he was just straight up smart. Like, he was smart. Like, he was a doctor, he was a philosopher, author, etc. And so what really, what we need to amplify as Filipinos is we are creative, we are smart, we are intelligent, and just like folks were saying, we need to amplify that. So when I'm thinking about Dr. Jose Rizal, and even the bridge up here is named after him, you know, I think about how much courage he had to be able to fight this huge country for his people, for the love, etc. One of the things that I remember about Dr. Jose Rizal is he talks about you have to know your history in order to move forward. Like, you need to know where you come from in order to see where you're going. So that really struck me. And to know that he died for his country. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, that's deep for me. Well, I grew up watching beauty pageants and all of that. And in Hawaii, that's a big thing too. So I think for me, what I see as a strength as for women is not only the beauty part, but also the smarts. You know, in thinking about a female and what that looks like. You know, one of the things that I remember when I actually was at WSU, one of my friends was from Saipan, and he said he was a little afraid to talk to me because the Filipinas that he knew in Saipan were prostitutes. And I was like, wow, this is interesting, because here I am in the United States, you know, as a female and as a woman, and really wanting to, you know, make headway into spaces where women have never gone before. So going back to Pia, it really strikes me because I actually follow her on Instagram, and it's really cool for her to be almost like an entrepreneur. She also has started a line on some foods that she makes. So I'm really inspired by that. And these are young people who are doing these things and influencing the up and coming, and folks like me who are not the up and coming, who can be able to inspire people. So it was really, really cool to see that. Mabuhay Pilipinas!